The silence was the first thing that struck him. It was vast, oppressive, and absolute. On the moon, there were no chirping birds, no hum of distant machinery, no whisper of wind through trees. For Major Colin Reeves, the silence had always been a hauntingly beautiful part of his lunar missions. But now, stranded and alone, it was suffocating. He sat in the command module, staring at the dark, lifeless horizon beyond the reinforced window. His crew had departed 3 days ago. They thought he was dead, a fatal accident during a maintenance routine on the rover. The fall had knocked him unconscious, and by the time he awoke, the ascent module was gone, taking with it the only means of returning to Earth. The realization had hit him slowly, like ice creeping into his veins. He had tried the radio, shouting into the void for hours, but the static, that mocking, indifferent static, had been his only reply. The ship's automated systems confirmed his worst fears. The main communication array had been damaged in the same accident that left him stranded. The emergency beacon wasn't strong enough to reach Earth, not without the primary array to amplify it. Colin wasn't prone to panic. Years of rigorous training had taught him to compartmentalize his emotions, to think critically under pressure. But as the days dragged on, the weight of his situation began to gnaw at him. The mission's protocols had been clear. If any crew member was lost and presumed dead, the others were to prioritize the return to Earth. It was a grim necessity, designed to maximize the survival of the majority. He couldn't blame them for leaving. He would have made the same call. But understanding didn't make the loneliness any less crushing. Colin's days fell into a strict routine. He inventoried the supplies, calculating how long they would last. The lunar base's greenhouse was functional, providing him with a steady supply of oxygen and a limited amount of food. Water was recycled through the base's life support systems. By his estimates, he could survive for several months, maybe longer if he rationed carefully. He spent hours repairing what he could of the communication systems, though the damage was extensive. He had little hope of fixing it alone. Nights, or what passed for nights on the moon's eternal cycle of sunlight and shadow, were the hardest. He would sit outside the habitat, staring at Earth, a blue and white jewel suspended in the infinite black. It seemed so close, and yet impossibly far. One evening, as he watched the Earth rise, a strange thought struck him. What if no one was there to look back? The idea was absurd, of course. Billions of people lived on Earth. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, and then into months, that question began to fester in his mind. The radio silence was unbroken. Not even a whisper from the emergency channels that were always monitored. Colin decided to investigate. He diverted power from the habitat's non-essential systems to the long-range telescope. It was a gamble, but he needed answers. What he found chilled him to his core. The Earth looked wrong. Through the telescope, he could see vast swathes of darkness where cities should have been. The lights of civilization, so familiar and constant, were missing. There were signs of devastation, massive storms, unusual patterns of smoke and ash, even what appeared to be large-scale fires. He couldn't see the details, but the overall picture was clear. Something catastrophic had happened. Desperation gripped him. He recorded what he saw, using the limited data storage available in the base's systems. He sent another burst transmission, hoping against hope that anyone, might be listening. But the silence persisted. Colin's days took on a new purpose. He became a reluctant archaeologist, piecing together clues from the scant information available. He scoured the base's databases, searching for news reports, scientific data, anything that might explain what had happened. But the information was limited, outdated. The last news articles were months old, and there was no mention of any impending disaster. His isolation began to take a toll. He found himself talking to the base's AI, a rudimentary system designed for maintenance and monitoring. It wasn't much of a conversationalist, but it was better than the unending silence. He named it Ariel, a nod to the Shakespearean sprite. Ariel became his confidant, his lifeline to sanity. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked one day, knowing the AI wouldn't have an answer. "Probability of rescue is low," Ariel replied, its voice calm and neutral. "Based on current data, It is unlikely a mission will be launched within the next 6 months. Colin sighed. Thanks for sugarcoating it. You're welcome, Major Reeves. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Colin's beard grew thick. His muscles began to atrophy despite his best efforts to exercise. He adapted to the solitude, though the weight of it never lifted. He took to writing, filling notebooks with thoughts, memories, and observations. It was a way to anchor himself, to leave something behind in case he didn't make it. One day, while scanning the lunar horizon, he saw something unusual. A flash of light, brief but unmistakable. It wasn't natural. He suited up and ventured out, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. As he approached the source of the light, he found a small probe, partially buried in the lunar dust. It bore no markings, no insignia to indicate its origin. He brought it back to the base, carefully dismantling it to access its data core. What he found was staggering. The probe contained a message, encoded in multiple languages. It wasn't from Earth. The message was simple, yet profound. We are here. You are not alone. Colin stared at the words, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. He had always believed in the possibility of extraterrestrial life, but this was confirmation. And more than that, it was a lifeline. Whoever had sent this message knew of his existence. He spent days analyzing the probe, trying to decipher its origins. The technology was advanced far beyond anything Earth had developed. It used a form of energy transmission that was entirely unfamiliar to him. He couldn't determine where it had come from, but the message was clear. He wasn't alone. Weeks later, another probe arrived, this one landing closer to the base. It contained more data, including detailed instructions for building a communication device. Colin worked tirelessly, following the instructions with meticulous care. When he finally activated the device, a voice greeted him. It was melodic, almost musical, and spoke in perfect English. Major Colin Reeves, we have been watching. We are sorry for your suffering. Help is on the way. Tears streamed down his face as the voice continued. The beings, whoever they were, had been monitoring Earth for decades. They had witnessed the catastrophe that had wiped out humanity. They didn't elaborate on what had happened, but they promised to explain everything once they arrived. And so Colin waited, his solitude no longer as heavy. He spent his days preparing for their arrival, maintaining the base and documenting his thoughts. When the ship finally appeared on the horizon, a sleek, luminous craft that seemed to defy the laws of physics, he felt a surge of hope unlike anything he had ever known. As the beings emerged, their forms unlike anything he could have imagined, he realized that his journey was just beginning. He was the last human alive, but he was no longer alone. The universe had opened its arms to him, and with it came a new chapter of existence, one filled with possibilities he had never dared to dream.